that doesn't involve writing. But if I just said, I'll sell you my car for $100, and you say, yes, I'll accept your car for $100, if either side doesn't come through with either providing the car or providing $100, they can be sued, even though that's not in writing, because this is for a contract for sale and goods that do not exceed $500, so there's no requirement be in writing. What if I say, I'll sell you my Green Acre for $100, and you say, yes, I'll buy it for $100, well, we don't have a valid contract that's enforceable because that involves land or real estate. So therefore, the $500 doesn't matter. When we're talking about real estate, it has to be in writing. $500 does matter for sale of goods exceeding $500. That's called the statute of frauds. Alright, now going back to the defenses to contract. The book talks about mistake, a misunderstanding or confusion about a material fact in a contract that is shared by both parties. So now I'm going to mixing that with the mutual assent. Obviously, if both parties believed that they were contracting on a point A, but it really was about point B, then both parties have a mistake, and there would be a defense, or that would be a way to get out of the contract. If there's as I said before, if there's a mistake, the court could rescind the contract, which means put both parties back as if no contract ever existed. Must be mutual, which means if only one party was mistaken, then it's not a mutual mistake, and therefore the mistake concept will not be a way to rescind the contract. Just if one party thinks so, or if one party made a typical, we'll call it typical mistake, maybe they paid too much, maybe they, later on in the fact they realize they paid too much, is an ability to get out. Now of course, if there was fraud involved by one party, then the other party would be able to get out of the contract if there was in fact fraud. The book talks about fraud, so I don't need to go into fraud, but other than to say, as specifically as the book says, that a fraudulent act is the person who was defrauded would have to show that the other party made an intentional, deliberate, false statement about a material fact. So let's say the person said this house was built in 1954. And it turns out after the fact that the house was built in 1953. So of course one party, if they're trying to get out of the contract, might say, well, there was a fraudulent act. They said it was built in 1954. And the other party's going to say, well, how is 54, 53, how is that even, that's not even a material factor. Well, whether it is or not a material factor will be what the attorneys litigate. Maybe if it was built in 1953, it's considered a historical house, and if it's a historical house, certain things can't be done in it, as far as you can't replace the wood with hardy board, something that looks like wood but is really a type of cement. Maybe that would make a difference in the value of the house. But if it's just the only difference is 1953 or 54, and there's no material difference, then there's no fraud involved there, even if the statement even if the statement was intentionally made knowing that the statement was false. It's not considered fraud unless it's a material fact. So to the question of what will one have to show in order to prove, or what are the elements that one would have to prove in order to be able to get out of the contract based upon fraud, it would have to be a intentional, deliberate, false statement about a material fact. Not material, not considered fraud. Other defenses to a contract. Something that's called, and this is not in your book, it's called an impossibility defense. For example, what if the contract provided, I'll give you $100 for your car, or let me phrase that, I will sell you my car for $100, let me know by February 15th. Or I'll give you my, how about this, I will sell you my car and deliver it to you on February 15th for $100. And on February 12th, I say, yes, I'll buy it for $100. and then on February 14th, the car is destroyed by fire. Are you out your $100? No, because now it's legally impossible to fulfill, or not legally, it's impossible to fulfill the contract because the car has been completely destroyed. That's called impossibility. It just says it's spelled as the way it sounds, impossibility. It's an excuse for non-performance under the duties of a contract based upon a change in circumstance or the discovery of a pre-existing circumstance, the occurrence of which was an underlying assumption of the contract that makes performance of the contract literally impossible. For such a defense to be raised, performance must not merely be difficult or unexpectedly costly for one party, there must be no way for it to actually be accomplished. So my example, since the car was burnt, destroyed by fire, it's impossible to deliver it. What if before the car was to be dropped off, that somehow it was parked somewhere, got towed, and now it would cost me, the seller of the car, an extra $1,000 to get it to you? Well, that's not an impossibility defense. So if I were to, because it can be accomplished, it'll just cost me extra money, versus the fire happening makes it impossible for the contract to be fulfilled. So it's an excuse for the non-performing party under a contract. Now, I'm not going to repeat it again since it's on video. You'll have the ability to just rewind that and listen to it again. The next defense I want to talk to you about is something that's called frustration of purpose. A frustration of purpose is a defense to the enforcement of a contract. Frustration of purpose occurs when an unforeseen event undermines a party's principal purpose for entering into a contract, and both parties knew of this principal purpose at the time the contract was made. Where this concept of law came from is someone had put a deposit down to rent a room with a balcony to watch the coronation or parade or something about some king in England to become, I guess, the coronation or the parade. I can't remember which one it was. So they wanted a room to be able to see, a balcony to be able to see this happening. Well, the king got sick. The coronation got, or the prince, what I guess, king, court, prince, they got delayed for a period of time until the king or prince was better for the coronation to happen. I guess technically it would be the king, because they became the king as soon as the person ahead of them died, so they were the king, but the official crowning of the king. Because of the delay happened, the whole purpose of renting that room with the view at that day was gone. And as long as the person who was renting the room out knew that the reason the person was renting the room was to watch this parade or coronation, both in my definition it said both parties knew of the event. So both parties knew that that was the reason why the room was being rented. Now this event was delayed, so as a result, the person who was renting the room wasn't going to have to actually rent it. But on this frustration of purpose, because the person had made a deposit, that person loses the deposit, but they don't have to pay for the room. The innkeeper who sued for the payment of the room isn't going to have to be paid for the room, but they get to keep the deposit. Once again, I'm not going to repeat what frustration of purpose is, since you have the ability just to rewind this on video. Alright, the next defense, that's also not in the book, is something called impracticality. Impracticality. I'm almost embarrassed as I can't pronounce it on the video here. Impracticability. This is what impracticability means here. Impracticability is similar in some respects to the doctrine of impossibility, because it's triggered by the occurrence of a condition which prevents one party from fulfilling the contract. The major difference between the two doctrines